Well, hello out there. Welcome back to another great episode of Fintech Hustle. I'm your host, Cornerstone Advisors Managing Director, Sam Kilmer. And I am really pleased, not only because it's summertime, got my nice summer tip of the hat here on, but also because I've just got a rock star guest lineup today. I think this may be a record for us in terms of number of guests and number of rock star guests. And so without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right in and give you a little bit of a background about who we've got assembled in this esteemed group. We've got Allison Cerra, who's the CMO of Alkami. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you, Sam.
We've got Laura Broderick, who's the CMO of Abrigo. Welcome, Laura. Good to see you both again.
Hello.
We've got TruStage Ventures Managing Director, Sam Doss. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Great to be here.
Yeah, and by the way, great first name there. I think we're going to come back to that later, perhaps. And also our CEO on the group, Revio CEO Brian Bauer. Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
And I should also point out I'm joined by our co-host with the most, Mary Wisniewski, our editor at large from Cornerstone Advisors. Thanks for joining, Mary.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Sam. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I should also point out Mary's also got a podcast of her own that I'm hoping someday I get to crash. Money isn't everything, right?
Money
Mary?
isn't everything. Yeah,
Right.
Where we explore really early stage ideas and a little bit of nonsense.
Very good, very good, very good. Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining, everyone. And it's been a really interesting summer tour. I think now that Financial Brand and Finovate and lots of the other events that are out there from spring and everybody's kind of getting ready for fall. I think we probably have some perspectives fresh in our mind, but I really just want to start with, your experiences. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, "Oh, you don't want to hear about my day. I just work at a blah blah." It's like, no. I think people really enjoy hearing about your days in the lives. So I just thought I would start. Allison, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about the day in the life of Allison Cerra over at Alkami. What's your day look like?
Oh gosh, well, no 2 days are the same. So if you're in this space, the good news is if you don't like today, stick around for 24 hours because tomorrow will be different. So I think every day is just a little bit different for all of us, but it varies for me from one day I could be working on, making sure the demand gen flywheel of Alkami is humming at full speed. And then the next day I could be sitting thinking about a thought leadership piece or narrative for company positioning for the long game. So it's every day is different. And one day you're running the sprint and every day you're building to the marathon for the future. So a lot of fun.
Sprints and marathons. I think it was, I've seen you out a lot, whether it's on I think I've seen you on Jim Marousse's, some of the things that he's been doing. And so I do see some of your content that you've been doing a lot of out there. So I can vouch for some of that. And well, Laura, what about what's the day in the life of Laura Broderick at Abrigo look like?
Yeah, well, similar to Allison, I'm also Chief Marketing Officer. So lead gen is always top of mind, obviously sort of the traditional B2B driving the tech leads. We just wrapped up our big annual conference, Sam. We had that in Phoenix. We had about 800 people. So sort of digesting all the cool trends and feedback we got from that. So trying to spend a lot of time listening to customers and really understanding what's on their mind. And obviously a little real Friday, we spent a lot of time doing customer comms, just given the big global outage of CrowdStrike and Windows. And so just as a reminder of how integral all of us are to the banking industry and, just kind of talking to customers, hearing their feedback. And I know even FinCEN was down for a period of time. So just to Allison's point, every day is different. But I just love the space. I love the mission, supporting community banks and credit unions. So just gets me excited. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, you're it's the chief marketing officer, but also the chief message officer. And at a time when something like CrowdStrike, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because I just, as it was happening, I was thinking to myself, wow, a big tip of the hat to all the IT professionals that were. I heard about many of you, I suspect, that were burning the midnight oil, not only following up with clients, but making sure that the lights were getting back on. So that's I'm glad you pointed that out, Laura, and goes goes to point out that a day in the life oftentimes turns out to a day in the night and the overnight in the life.
No, it does.
Some of us. But well, Sam, what about as the investor, your ventures, you're inside industry investor. I bet your day looks maybe a little bit different than maybe some of the rest of ours. What's it look like?
Well, I think there's going to be a common theme amongst everyone here. Like everyone's wearing multiple hats. And so depending on the time of day, see, look, Sam's changing his hat. There you go. And so, it goes from, taking calls from portfolio companies on, board matters to, as a strategic investor, we're always trying to figure out how are we best optimizing our connections to help the portfolio companies really penetrate the credit market and really address their needs. But then at the same time, I'm fielding calls and having conversations with credit union execs. And so I get to hear both sides of the story, what they're dying to get their hands on, new technologies, what are they trying to learn about, and then making those connections. And so it's great. Like I get both sides of the story and help provide that connective tissue to make things happen. So, we stay in the thick of it constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll come back to that. What do they want to learn about? Because you've got me devilishly curious about what some of the top 2 or 3 things that you're hearing in some of those conversations. But we'll come back to that. Brian, what's the day in the life of I suspect I know because what we were supposed to be together was at Financial Brand sitting down, and you gave me the last minute, fired up the flare and said, "Hey, Sammy, I'm not going to make it," and I greatly appreciate it, and I totally get it, that kind of day in the life. But when it's not crazy town like that, what's the rest of your day look like?
Just like Sam, Laura, and Allison, I mean, we're on the Fintech Hustle, but we live the Fintech Hustle, right? And that means constantly kind of mode shifting between, talking to customers and, or prospective customers, kind of getting a read on the market as well. And then shifting over to product development and working with engineers. But, the real day in the life here is, I like to wake up early. And if I'm in my routine and it's good, I like to start the day with reading a book. If I can get that 30 minutes or 40 minutes, that's kind of to myself. And also, helping educate myself on topics that are, not maybe even related to financial services, banking, or fintech, but, some of that focus time in the morning before I shift over towards those conversations. So it is a juggle between I like to spend time talking to customers. I like to spend time working on our product and helping the engineers and product team develop that. But of course, I'll always get pulled into administrative directions as well. So as we all have to.
Yeah. Interesting. In this, I like the living the hustle, by the way. I in the spirit of living the hustle, why don't we just kind of jump right in? I would love your take, kind of back, Sam, to something you brought up in your introduction, which is, what are the things that credit unions or banks or other potential investors or any side of it in this space? It's a very messy space. And I remember when I started out in this space, you just kind of had the bankers at one cocktail party, the vendors at another one, or the fintechs at another one, and then you had the investors, and they were kind of 3 different cocktail parties. And then it became like Wedding Crashers, and it's all one now. But I guess, Allison, let's start with you, since I guess I'm kind of almost going alphabetical here, not by design, but what are some of the things that you're hearing, and what are some of the big topics that, when you're out and about and talking with folks in your client and prospect base, that are rising to the top of the fintech conversation?
I think it's, this is dizzying to be in this industry. I think every day we say, like, today has more change than yesterday, but the rate of change now is exponential, and it's coming at financial institutions from all sides. So whether we're looking at the great intergenerational wealth transfer to millennials largely, and what that means to their account holders and how that demographic is changing, to the great intergenerational work transfer to the Zs entering the workforce, and for the first time this year outnumbering the boomers. They're dealing with workforce complexion changes, account holder complexion changes, They're dealing in an inflationary rate environment they haven't seen in quite some time. They're dealing with new technologies like AI, and what does that mean? And how do they have to get their data house in order? Because we've been talking about big data enough in this industry for more than a decade. It's time. And they know that others are ahead of them, megabanks in particular, because they have the lead on the data house and now applying the artificial intelligence to that. And then they've got government regulations, which are uncertain at best, maybe even risky or threatening at worst. So they've got challenges all around them, and at the same time, opportunities all around them, depending on how they seize these inflection points that are kind of, tectonic shifts in the industry on multiple levels.
Yeah. What, Sam, does that kind of line up with some of the topics that you're hearing on the calls that you're having with with your credit union and investors and others just interested? Since you brought the question up, I thought it was a good one. What are you hearing? What's coming up in more conversations than less?
Yeah, I mean, you would probably not be overly surprised around the number of conversations I have talking about the ins and outs of AI, which is great, to be honest. If you think about it, over the last, call it, 5-10 years, so many institutions, TruStage included in that, have been going through this digital transformation. And so much of that, those initial years were focused on improving that customer journey and trying to remove friction from that experience. But I think we're transitioning now to the efficiency transformation. Like, how can organizations become more efficient utilizing the technologies that are now more readily available, utilizing AI, Gen AI, process automation, et cetera, and really thinking about how to really streamline organizations. And, the one thing that I hear constantly is lack of bandwidth to implement things, even just human capital issues that are coming up to topic. That's where, really utilizing that human capital in the most efficient way to really optimize experience and leveraging technology to fill in the gaps and to make those improvements. That's really top of mind across the board. And so right now, we're coming out of summer shortly. Credit unions are in peer planning mode. And so I have like half a dozen different conversations with management teams and boards of credit unions lined up for the fall to talk about all these topics and really get a good deep dive as to what they should be focusing, and more importantly, how should they be prioritizing their own budget dollars to across the different solution that they're going to need to invest in. The good news is they realize that is a imperative now. I would say like 5 years ago, it was a nice to have. Now I feel like there's a really big shift in mindset, and including the boards at credit unions, which I think is a more recent phenomenon.
Very interesting. Laura, is that, I think you mentioned was it your Think Big conference?
Yeah. Exactly.
Is that, any of this consistent or any other topics that you were
Absolutely
running up?
I think what Sam's really hitting on is it's not just driving efficiency to take cost. It's really driving efficiency to go secure growth. One of the biggest challenges that financial institutions, particularly community financial institutions, have is access to talent. They're just not able to get the talent or the experienced talent that they need. And so relying on their partners to help them with technology that can kind of bring better and faster and AI, Gen AI infused capabilities in the technology is really critical. So many of them, I think about 20% are considering investing themselves in Gen AI, but almost all of them are saying they really want to rely on their partners to help bring AI into the system starting next year, whether that's with like credit narratives. We're in the compliance business and the loan origination business. So generating suspicious activity reports, like really all the things that normal people are starting to do in ChatGPT, like how do we bring that into our products? And I think our customers were a little scared of that maybe 2 years ago. And now they're saying, gosh, we've got to get on it. both to kind of keep up with the big banks, which are, Jamie Dimon's got trillions of dollars invested in this, it seems like, and 600 data scientists or something crazy. So just to try to help these CFIs just kind of compete, it's just so paramount. They have to invest in technology because they don't have the people and they still need to go after growth. So just those trends are very consistent with what Sam was saying.
Yeah, it's like they're not making data scientists fast enough. I mean, that seems like the
but they're like $250,000 a pop. So, and they're not going to want to go work at a small bank in rural Indiana. So it's like, how do you sort of tap into that on a consortium basis? How do we bring that to bear for them?
Well, even on that point too, I mean, you bring up a great issue about attracting talent. One of the things I see that preventing that type of talent going to community FIs is the fact that they just don't, in many instances, they don't have a rock solid data strategy or access to the data that they need, right? And so someone who is potentially going to inherit that as an issue, that's a tall order. Like, what do you expect me to do when I can't even get to the type of data that I need? And
that's right. They got to fill the lake. The lake doesn't exist. They got to go and get the water and dig the hole and get the data in there. So yeah.
Wow,
the janitorial work.
Wild, but it actually might pull some people in. I mean, there's a lot of people who want a job just because they're like, wow, this problem's so big. Let me go and get it.
And Mary, I want to just echo that, because even as we talk about the generational work transfer happening right now with Zs outnumbering boomers for the first time, I don't think we can put bigger emphasis on that, because I think it goes to kind of what the employee experience is going to be in the future and what they expect. But one thing, we looked at this a couple of years ago when the Great Resignation was happening, and we asked the generations, younger generation Zs and millennials in particular, would you be interested in working for regional or community FI? And more than 2/3 said yes, they would. And the reason might surprise you, or maybe it doesn't, but Zs in particular, what regional community FIs have that other companies like big tech don't have is the financial education that they can give the Zs. So the Zs has seen the millennials go through the Great Recession and come out of it many times worse than obviously entering it, being the generation most impacted by it. They don't want that life. They don't want a life where buying a home actually hinders wealth versus building it. They want to start building wealth now. They're very financially savvy. So regional and community FIs can actually tap in to giving these younger generations access to a master class in managing your finances and getting on a solid financial foundation that other companies can't compete against. So tap into what they naturally can do to attract a generation that is sitting there going, I'm not going to be where the other generations are in a few years, where I'm looking at how am I going to build wealth into my retirement.
Hey, Brian, I want to get your thoughts here. Are any other themes or any of these resonating in some of your calls with clients and others out in the market?
Oh, for sure. I mean, a couple of points here touched on, right? I mean, I think in the macro of the market forces that our customers are in right now, we've all kind of experienced the rise in acquisition cost, the rise in deposit acquisition and customer acquisition cost, which, for a lot of community banks has really put pressure on their primary business model of lending, especially to, small, mid-sized businesses. That's really been the bread and butter over the last, 10, 15 years, especially, if not longer. But, what that really in turn results in is the need for more customer insight, right? So kind of zooming in a little bit on data and analytics and AI, and it's really about what can I understand and know about my customer and the customer's unmet needs and potential needs, leveraging the information that we have or the information that's available. And then look, on the flip side, it is a talent. There's a talent problem as well in this industry, right? So it's, once I have that insight, what do I do with it? And there's all kinds of digital channels that we can engage our customers on. But, community and regional banks also have to balance that with a hybrid approach of how do I kind of empower that relationship that my individual bankers can have? Because, when it comes to these comments around, Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan and the other large FIs and fintechs that are out there, they've invested heavily They've invested 100,000 times more than most of these community and regional banks can invest into a data strategy. That's leading to the rise in acquisition costs, right? It's not just the fact that the interest rates have adjusted that's led to that deposit competition. It's the amount of customer intelligence, customer information that these large FIs and fintechs are leveraging that are really causing these community and regionals to have to compete, harder for for those customers and those deposits. And so that those topics are so intertwined and interrelated between acquisition costs, customer insights, and talent. Those are really, I would say, three pillars of kind of what we're hearing in the market.
Yeah, I love the fact that in a group of tech-focused individuals, leaders, that this is not the first time this has happened, that we keep coming back to people, as opposed to automation. Although automation, the people that drive the automation are obviously. It's not that automation isn't the thing. It's just that the people that drive it, it's just very different. But Mary, I know you've been doing a lot of interviewing with kind of what I would call kind of challenger fintechs too, beyond those that are kind of beefing up the banks and credit unions, but also kind of going to market. To Brian's point around customer acquisition cost, I know that's been a little bit of a barrier for some of the direct fintechs. But is these topics consistent with what you've been hearing, or is there anything else that any big topics coming up in your conversations?
Yeah, I would add what it just makes me think about right now, Sam, is that one of the startups called Debbie, which sells to credit unions, engagement tool to pay down debt or save money, and it rewards you based on doing these things. And the founder Frida had worked at Goldman Sachs, and she had mentioned like unlimited resources was actually a burden. And it's now not a thing at a startup, right? So it's like helps you keep your focus. So that's one added dimension I'd mention. And another dimension that I'm really curious about, everyone here, their opinion on this, but we've mentioned Chase a couple of times, and I know there was sort of a haughty article in the Wall Street Journal from a Chase executive saying, hey, if all these regulations pass, we're charging more. But they already charge for accounts. There's just like loopholes. But I'm wondering, and this is speculative, but I'm curious if anyone has a strong point of view of like, hey, if Chase started charging more or remove some of the loopholes to make it free for, let's say, its checking account, what kind of ripple effect would that have for credit union account, or what opportunity, or maybe there's no answer yet, but I'm really curious about that.
Mary, it's a good point, because the Wall Street Journal reported probably about a year ago that over the past 10 years, U.S. consumers have forfeited $600 billion in deposit interest alone by keeping their deposits in the top 5 banks. So clearly, this isn't just if this were a case of, look, it's because I can get better rates at a regional or community FI, that game has been won because regional and community FIs have been shown to provide the better rates. I think the challenge really is, how do you acquire that account holder, and how do you drive a differentiated user experience on top of that? So I think this is beyond. If Chase does that, obviously they're big enough in the industry, it's going to have some kind of cascading effect. But I think that is not going to be sufficient for regional and community FIs to think that that's enough, because they've already essentially been providing better service, better rates. And yet, Chase and the megabanks still have, the lion's share of the deposit holders. So there has to be something else to that, I think.
That makes me think of your other comments about the ages. And I'm really curious about that too, both from Gen Z standpoint, but also from an older adult standpoint, because something I am seeing is like Charlie, which is a neobank for the over 62, recently launched a feature called Speed Bump, which slows down a money transfer for 6 hours in case it's fraud. So like that's an example of what might attract, someone to that brand. Also, they do a lot of, they focus on the Facebook community to try to recruit customers. And then on the Gen Z side, I am fascinated because it's such a tension. You you hear a lot of jokes of like people not really understanding their work styles. But like, it's just like freedom, flexibility seem to be prevalent. Sam's got his bucket hat on, so he's very Gen Z. But I think appealing to a personality type that, might be working 2 jobs, might be, freelancing on the side in a way that's a little bit different than years past. I think that will be a curiosity too.
Yeah, the gig economy, obviously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel these are all kind of interconnected topics, right? Because to your point, if Chase is forcing the marketplace to adjust how institutions charge back their consumers, there is a forcing function here to invest in business model innovation and figuring out how to adapt what banking is today and where that's going to go in the future. So it's not just adopting fintech. It's thinking more holistically as how do you maintain credit union business, bank businesses going forward? Because it's already starting to change. Right? There's already so much pressure on bank fees that's been curtailed, and I have countless conversations with credit unions about how do we really focus in on a strategy for our non-interest income opportunities, but that ultimately lead back to how are we serving our members in the best way possible, and are we providing them the services that they will need, but may also generate opportunity for us as an institution for our P&L. These are all great conversations, and it's the domino effect. Once you solve for one, you start innovating, and it continues. And so I think it's good for the marketplace to have these conversations, because at the end of the day, the people who are going to win are the consumer. They're going to get the solution that they need at the right price that they're willing to pay that supports the banking industry.
I think that's
go ahead, Brian. It's a really, I was kind of brewing that thought myself as we were having this conversation, which is, I think consumers especially are inundated with subscription fees today, and they're used to being charged for services in that way. But if you're looking at it on the fees, the fee side, refocusing the lens to the value side of what that is and what am I offering as an institution, and that's where I think. And I'm not going to, claim any clairvoyance here, right? Into the best innovative, new deposit product that might be available. But I really do think that that's where, rethinking what it means to be a financial services provider to a retail consumer, especially. And I think, banks on the relationship level, especially community and regionals, do a very good job with their SMBs and mid-market businesses, because guess what? You can pick up the phone and call somebody, but how do you deliver that innovative business model to that consumer today, whose expectations are not what they were 20 years ago, but what most FIs are delivering is the expectation of 20 years ago, right? And so how do we innovate there? And, I don't know if anyone has any ideas there, but, certainly looking out into the market, especially at a lot of these fintechs who sometimes come up with some great ideas whenever they go to market with their business models, right? You kind of get to ride on some venture capitalists' R&D budget, when you see a fintech go to market, and sometimes you see FIs kind of copy those best practices, and sometimes those best practices blow up, and that fintech fizzles away. But that's kind of the experimentation that's ultimately needed in the market. I would hope to see more actual community and regional banks kind of grab the reins on that innovation and really try to drive and create best practices and new examples of what's the next, what's the new innovative deposit product that really encompasses the customer's financial life and serves them.
I think it's interesting to me that if you look at whether it's a lot of the startup fintechs or even startup neobanks or whatever, they usually have one or two, probably no more than 2 hooks. They just have a really salient hook, and it may even be a hook that many banks and credit unions already have in their arsenal. But I think it's just unmistakable that they have a sprint or a continuous review of their digital tech, whatever they're, as typically the primary reach, and then let's just call it what it is. None of them, and we got 2 CMOs here on this podcast, these people are not skimping on marketing. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been inside of a bank or a credit union that has said, well, we really don't have anything in our product portfolio that's really any different than anybody else. And well, we really aren't very good at marketing. And it's like, yeah, you might want to get both of those things. Free consulting. Hello. But, I don't mean to be too flip about it, but seriously, that's like, to me, that's existential. at this stage. But Laura, I think you were about ready to make a comment.
No, I totally agree. Like, and my side job is looking at banks' websites and offering them, telling the AE that's trying to sell them a loan product, hey, just like your website could use some improvement here. But just, but I do think one of the things that what I love about this space is just the personal touch that these bankers have, and so anything we could do with the technology to get them out into the market even more, and I think. Maybe that's the Gen Z grab. Like, really, is it as these Gen Zers are starting their own businesses and they're looking to have both consumer lending or consumer loan, personal needs, business needs? Like, is it coming back to the human touch? I don't know, but that's the thesis that's really driving these community institutions is that personal touch. And so, anything we can do to help them, because their websites are terrible, but the human contact that they have is really is paramount for them. So how do we kind of put that on steroids for them?
That's at the heart of why community FIs work, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I moved, I opened up a new credit union account. My wife actually went into the branch and set it up. I went in a couple days later, and I was talking to the teller there, and I was just trying to just get some money out. But she already knew who I was. And I had never even stepped there. She just knew that from the conversation she had with my wife. And she got a lot of information from my wife. My wife, I thought. But yeah, she knew what school my kids were going to. And,
this happens to me all the time, Sam. It's almost like we're kindred spirits.
And and so, we were having a real conversation, and, she was developing this bond with me. And where we at now is that, to Sam's point, like you ask some folks within a community FI and, they'll just say, we're doing what everyone else is doing, but that's not really true, because you're actually now at a point where you can take those human relationships and institutionalize them using technology and get to that level of personalizations across lots of different channels. And if you can harness that power, you have an organization that can take a run at any large bank.
That's right.
That's what people need. When people are in trouble, they want that connection with their institution to help them solve that problem. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, it can't be exclusively digital, in my opinion, right? I mean, that's where I think a lot of banks, and there's been a lot of providers out there that have spent a lot of money to market to banks to say, digital only, or that's where the lion's share of the focus has been. It's really that hybrid approach, right? And we like to talk about empowering the relationship channel, right? Which is that human connection that Sam was just talking about. Because guess what? Wells Fargo, they can outspend you 10,000 to 1, but they actually can't have that relationship channel that you have with the customer. And so you get inundated with digital offers all day long, but as Sam recalls that interaction that he had with it, with his community FI down the street, it's meaningful and memorable. Because I don't remember the last email I got from Credit Karma, but I would remember that conversation. I do remember the last conversation I had with my community banker about an important topic or just engaged in casual conversation.
Right.
And this is where
I want to be able to go from a chatbot conversation to transfer to my cell phone and jump in my car and then end up at a branch and talk to someone with a full continuity of that relationship. That's what a community FI can do. And do well and really serve on that omni-channel approach wherever that consumer is going to be.
But let's be real with each other here. Let's be intellectually honest, because megabanks are using technology to replicate that hyper personalization and customer intimacy that regional and community FIs have become known for at scale. So yes, totally agree with what everybody is saying here. But we also can't be deceived into thinking that the mega banks aren't looking at this on the flip side, which is technology is always the great equalizer on either side of that fence. And where mega banks are basically going to close that gap or attempt to is by leveraging the technology to a tech-reliant generation, both Zs and millennials, who are increasingly the wealth bearers, to basically draw them in. So we've got to basically make sure the regional and community FIs know that so that they can continue to position against it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely in my opinion, a hybrid approach here, where you have to have all of the expected digital conveniences and personalization through those channels, Because guess what? In a world where I can go on Amazon and I can click the button and have it tomorrow,
That's right.
that has shifted the user expectation for everything else, right?
That's right.
Including banking. And so that, in my opinion, it's the table stakes just to be in the game these days, right? You have to have that broad digital convenience. But it's in my opinion, and maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, Allison, maybe where we differ is this relationship aspect is something that I believe is not replicable very easily with those large FIs. And I think the differentiating factor here where, when it comes to the 68%, call it, or the 70% of the assets that the top 25 banks have, that's where I think the community FIs can compete and pull away some. So it is a both, no doubt.
Exactly. And Brian, I don't disagree. Like our CFIs have been here because of that community connection. I just think where I think some of them may be looking at this threat is now megabanks are leveraging technology to try to replicate that at scale. Yeah. And that's something that I think we just have to be mindful of. And I think that to everybody's point here, we started this talk about efficiency. And for a long time, where we're starting to see the largest FIs start to differentiate now is we talked about employee efficiency at the top of this, it's the employee experience. So it's like the UX on the customer or the account holder experience. If you're already kind of in rarefied air there and you can't rest on laurels, because Brian, to your point, the Amazons of the world are not resting on laurels, they'll keep setting the bar higher. But now what we're starting to see in our research is that FIs are saying employees are no longer second-class citizens. And that's not just an AI conversation. That is really taking an honest look at the experience of the employee and the outdated consoles, many times provided by vendors, that these FIs have tolerated for far too long that interrupt that experience, because a UX, as we all know, is a fluid, unified thing. The employee experience is hindering unintentionally the customer experience. That's now the area that these larger FIs are starting to kind of focus on to close that gap.
All right. So we just got a few minutes left here. That's a nice exchange we had going there. In the spirit of since I'm a consultant, I have a tendency to go negative. Sorry, it's kind of my way. So in the spirit of problem solving in the industry, let's just go negative for a minute. Would love everybody's quick take, maybe 30 seconds or so, on something that you think is broken in the industry, whether it's in fintech or banking or whatever, that could need fixing, that could use some attention right now. And I'm really open-minded on who goes first, but I don't know. I'll say, since Allison, we just wrapped up with you and Brian have a conversation. How about Sam or Laura? Either one of you guys have a take on something you see broken out in the business that you think could use some TLC?
The thing that irks me is I have numerous conversations with FIs who put fraud at the top of their concern list, and rightfully so. Fraud is just more prevalent than I think anyone really understands and observes. The disconnect I see, though, is they're not necessarily investing the way that they invest in new member acquisition strategies and in other areas. And that's going to catch up to folks sooner rather than later. Credit unions and community banks are seeing delinquency rates starting to increase, and a lot of that is fraud related. And it's going to come to a head.
Fraud is a buzzkill as opposed to fraud as a serious area of addressing.
Well, it's part of that disconnect is just a level of education and level setting within the FIs themselves to understand how pervasive the risk ultimately is. Because I think once that, unlike some of the other areas where they are investing, they have a firm understanding of where the interest rate environment is, and what their deposit capacity is, and how they could potentially seek out new members to join the organization. Like, that's all territory that they have a good founding on. Fraud is a whole nother frontier. And it goes all hand in hand with the AI conversation. We are in an AI arms race.
What do you think, Laura?
Funny. At first, I was going to say fraud too. Just we are in the compliance business, and one of the things that I've come up to speed on the last year is how prevalent check fraud is. You would think people aren't writing checks, but the government issues all these checks. And we just had a recent postal service worker do a webinar with us. I mean, the rise of attacks on postal workers to steal these checks that basically shortchange the bank. All these banks are just getting ripped off by all this check fraud, like fake checks, synthetic checks. Like, it's fascinating to me that what's old is new again. I just heard also that VHS systems are coming back in vogue. So, we had the vinyl records and VHS. Well, check fraud is here to stay also. So I think where we're so excited about AI, guess what? Bad actors love AI, and any technology that can be used for good absolutely can be used for bad. And so, or evil, I should say. So we're seeing that. So I agree.
Brian?
Well, look, it would be easy to say customer insights, but you got a couple of people on this call at least that are solving those, solving in that category. I think outside of that, the biggest challenge in the industry, the biggest gap is a sales culture developed in banking. And, look, this has been a bad word in banking for a long time, is sales. And if you think of sales as the person you might buy a used car from, then I understand why you have that maybe conception. But if you think of sales as maybe the person you would engage with at the Tiffany's counter, who is very helpful and consultative in their approach, I think maybe you have a better example. And so I think the industry really needs to look at sales culture in a way that they've not looked at, maybe in decades. And so we've got to engage our customers on a human level. If you are doing sales correctly, in my opinion, you are serving the customer's best interests. And so if as a bank, you're going to reflect on that, and maybe you have a challenge with, oh man, if we fix the sales culture problem, but what about our offering? Well, then that's your first indication that you need to look internally at the offering and maybe look at the product mix of the bank and ensure that what you actually have is not just the easiest thing to offer, but was really what your customers needed. Because if you've got that good sales culture, you should feel comfortable getting out there and engaging.
Hashtag look internally. Allison.
I'm going to echo what Brian just said, because our research shows, we talk culture, strategy. It's a mindset shift. We've seen smaller FIs that score equally as high as the largest FIs in the US on just kind of digital and data maturity. And they do it not by a technology strategy. They do it first by a cultural mindset change. So it goes to what Brian just said. How do they think about sales and service in their organization? And is sales a pejorative word, or is sales opportunistic based on helping the account holder achieve their financial goals and dreams? It goes into talent acquisition strategy, which we've talked about in this call. Do they look only insularly at this industry, or do they look outside of the industry for new talent? It goes to who they see as their competition. Do they see the regional bank or credit union down the street still as their primary competition, or are they setting their sights higher at the megabanks, who actually hold the lion's share of deposit account holders in the US, right? So it goes to a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, it's their mindset change. Do they prioritize data and insights, to Brian's point, or do they prioritize their gut instinct and their own knowledge and experience to make decisions? It starts at the tone of the top, and it starts at the strategy of the top of the culture that institution has. And it does not come down to asset size to determine this. It really comes down to their mindset on how they compete and if they're going to succeed.
Mindsets over assets. Hashtag. Mary, anything else?
Yeah, Sam, I was hopeful when you said there's a change in the board sort of mentality, because one thing I think is a big problem can be members of the board. I know I've spoken to several females who will go to like a banker conference, maybe more of a like traditional one, and they say they still get the questions of like, how old are you? Which is like not okay, right? So like, I would say that is a problem to work on as an industry. And I'm excited for the board member to continue to evolve, let's say.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, listen, guys, I know you all have rocking busy schedules as leaders, and so I want to be mindful of your time, but I do want to stop and thank all of you. Laura Broderick, CMO of Abrigo, Allison Cerra, CMO of Alkami, Sam Dosh, Managing Director of TruStage Ventures, and Brian Bauer, CEO of Revio. And to the point that you raised earlier, Laura, I think about the return of vinyl records. I want you all to know that you are all going to be receiving, watch your mail, this coveted vinyl record set. Don't try to play them. Those are coasters. Put your bourbon on there or your coffee or whatever your speed is. The check is in the mail, or the vinyl is in the mail, as they say. But we really appreciate you joining us. And Mary, thanks for joining us again and sharing some insights with the team. And welcome. And thanks again for joining us all on an episode of Fintech Hustle. We'll see you all out there on the road.